Okay, so let's take a look for a second as to what we're going to be doing this week for our homework. Okay, once again, we're going to continue exploring the principles of animation through a fun little animation called the pendulum swing. This is going to give us a great opportunity to kind of continue, building our muscle of how to animate correctly inside of Adobe Animate. And if you look at the example that we're going for, that's it. Okay, simply just a heavy weight on the end of a static object that's pivoting from a very specific spot inside of our three-dimensional scene. Now, when it comes to the principles of animation, what does this ultimately allow us to generate? Look carefully at the motion here. What makes it feel a little bit more real? Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We're recreating our sense of gravity pretty directly in here. Now, visually, what suggests that gravity is at play here?
The decay of motion.
Love it, using some fancy terminology, the decay of motion, right? So the reduction of speed, okay, or if you look a little bit more directly inside, it's maybe the inclusion of speed. Now, if you look very, very closely at our animation here, where is it moving the fastest? The middle, right? When it's kind of right bloop, in the middle of our stage here, that's where our pendulum is moving the fastest. Why? It's going down, it's swinging down, and in every sense, gravity is pulling this object down to good old Mother Earth, right? The forces that are being imposed upon our little pendulum are at their greatest when the pendulum is kind of on its downward slope, right? Then as it swings back up, what happens? It slows, right? Once again, gravity is going to continue to pull on it. So as it swings up, it's going to start to slow down a little bit. This project is going to give us a really great opportunity, and I apologize for the live stream, a really great opportunity for us to continue looking at timing and spacing of all of our animation frames, okay? Let's jump in and start taking a look at it, okay? Because there's a couple things in here that we need to accomplish to recreate our illusion of gravity. Let's jump over into Animate here real fast and start our little adventure. Okay. Now, there's a couple things that I would encourage you to do, and as we start to flesh out and create some of the details of our scene. First and foremost is this idea of a symbol. Now, last week we played a little bit around with symbols. What is a symbol inside of the Animate world? Has anyone kind of discovered it? Yeah, it's like an object, and probably more specifically, it's a reusable object, okay? Something that we create initially and then permanently save in our library. We can continue to use over and over and over again. Think of it like a gigantic prop box sitting in your room, right? And we have our stage, and then we take things out of our prop box and place them on our stage. These props can be moved around, they can be animated, and then, of course, naturally, they can be reused in a lot of different areas, okay? Let's create a symbol, okay, real fast. It's super easy, and I'm just going to use some of the shape creation tools here inside of Flash to create our simple little symbol. FYI, and I'll let you explore this on your own. If you're more comfortable creating art in other applications like Photoshop and Illustrator, you can import all that stuff here into Adobe Animate and then preserve it as a symbol using this exact same process, okay? I'm just going to use some of our vector creation tools to get us up and running. Before we get too started here, let me zoom in, and I'm going to get rid of my title and action safe layer. Bloop, bye-bye. And let's do some drawing, okay? All good examples begin and end with a very simple example. And I think I'm just going to have, since we're doing a pendulum, okay, of course we're going to have a big sphere. And we're also going to need to have maybe some sort of central rope or pivot in here. Oops, I was holding down the shift key. There we go. Wonderful. Okay. Now I have two discontiguous shapes at the moment. And naturally, if I go over to my direct selection tool, which is the V key, I can move these around. Okay. However, has anyone discovered a way to get them to be completely aligned to each other? Excuse me. Let's check it out. There's actually some fun stuff in here that we can do to help our creation process go a little bit faster. Okay? All right, so don't ignore Now, if your snap is not on, where is it? I gotta remember where it is. There's actually a snap. There it is, snapping. Snap align, snap to guides, and snap to bitmap to pixels, okay? If snap align is enabled here under the view pull-down menu, check it out. This is going to be kind of challenging, but let's see. See if we can get close. Sometimes they'll snap into each other. Oh, they're snapping to the outside edges, just not the center. There, it's snapping that way. Snap to the bottom. Snap to the top, but we're not snapping it to the centers, okay? Now be careful in this process. If you do this, deselect, what's going to happen now? Has anyone discovered this? Okay. Now it's, oops, kind of generally all one piece, okay? You can go in and individually select some pieces. Let's see. Yeah, but this is kind of one of the challenges of working with some of our shape creation tools is that once they go whoop and cross over each other, all their points get welded. So be careful with that, okay? I want to hit the undo key a couple times. Get things unsnapped because we can continue working with these. Excuse me. Going back into that view menu, or excuse me, into, I'm horrible with menus, by the way. Where is it? Into the modify. Check it out, because now we can start to align these different objects and start centering them up a little bit more directly. So we're going to do line, align, horizontal centers, bloop, and now they're perfectly lined up. Yes, sir?
Yeah, I cannot find a line.
It's a rectangle tool. That's all I've done. So specifically, I made a circle, and then I made a rectangle. Yep. All right. Let's grab some points here. Oops. I'm going to go back and time a step because I don't want to have this shape. Let's see. Will the snap align work? No, but we'll just manually align them once again. Modify, align, horizontal center, bloop, there we go. And now we can figure out how long we want to have this shape be. Now I'm going to give myself a good playground here, and that's it. That's going to be my little pendulum. Now I want to save this piece of artwork, okay? And I want to create it in a way that allows us to have the ability to reuse this little pendulum over and over and over and over again, okay? This process is called a symbol, okay? Or what we're trying to generate is called a symbol. So if I select my shape using the direct selection tool, the dark arrow, and go to the top of the screen where it says insert, we do new symbol, okay? Now what this is going to do is allow us, hold on a second, I'll make sure I got everything selected here. Excuse me. Sorry, not insert, we're convert to symbol. My brain is not working at the moment. So I want to convert my selected piece of vector artwork into a reusable symbol, okay? And let's just call this pendulum, U-L-U-M. And now this next part is important because we want to make sure that we're assigning it the correct type. Now, there's 3 different types of symbols that we can create or convert into here in Adobe Animate. Which of these 3 choices do you think makes the most sense? Graphic, yeah, graphic. We don't want it to be a movie clip, we want it to be a graphic, okay? A movie clip is going to be an animated sequence like a movie file itself. We're definitely not making an animated button. We want to have it be a graphic, okay? And we can also, this folder here determines where inside of your project hierarchy, your project library hierarchy, this is going to reside. In more complex examples, you'll probably have a whole series of nested folders to organize your symbols. We're not there yet at that level of complexity, so putting it at the library root is going to be just fine. Okay, let's hit OK and zoom out a little bit and start to look at specifically what this looks like. Okay, believe it or not, we've now created something. If we go over into our library tab here, we now have, there it is, our little pendulum. Okay, now this is pretty cool. Once it resides in our library, I want to delete it from my layer, by the way. Excuse me. Once it's in my library, this now turns into an asset that I can left click and drag into any stage and continue to use and play around with it, right? I actually can have as many of these as I want inside of my scene, okay? So it's kind of the first thing that we're going to try to begin to do on all of our animations is to create some symbols. Imagine these symbols are kind of like actors or objects inside of our scene that we wish to animate, okay? Definitely makes our lives a little bit easier if we can go in and do this. Tyler, did you have a question? Well, I wasn't necessarily aligning it to the middle of the screen. I was trying to align them to the center of each other. Okay. Do you have both of them selected? Yeah, make sure you have both of them selected. Okay. All right, so I'm just zoomed out ever so slightly here. And now we can see the boundaries of my stage, okay? Before I go further, are there any questions on this? Yes, sir.
Yes, when you say the symbol, does it like get embedded in a flash file?
Yeah, so this is all in your flash file now, or your animate file now.
So if we just move to file, then the object is still there.
You're going to want to bring in the you want to bring the object that you imported with you, just in case. I've seen from time to time things get unreferenced. Okay. All right. So if you think about the animation that we're about to create here, yes. It's not showing up. Okay, let's take a look. Sue, what computer number are you? It says in the upper right-hand corner of your computer screen. 15. Let's spy on Sue's machine real fast. There it is. Okay, take us on a tour. No, it's there. I can see it right there. Pendulum. It's in your library. That. Left-click and drag that onto your stage. Interesting. Okay. All right, let's try, get rid of that. Hit the delete key. Go back to your big circle and your square and select both of them. There you go. All right, now let's create or convert that into a symbol. No. Modify. There we go. Convert to symbol. I think probably what you did is you created an empty symbol that didn't have anything inside of it. And that was entirely my fault because I initially took you into the wrong panel. That's my fault. So we want to convert an existing piece of artwork into a symbol. Did that solve your problem too? Yes, great. Cool. All right, let's get back to work here because we have a new challenge that sits in front of us on this assignment, or just on this animation as a whole, right? Is that I need to animate this object from a very defined fixed point, right? I'm trying to create the illusion that this object is swinging from a central pivot point. Pop quiz, what's that central pivot point called? Let's go back to physics class. Fulcrum, right, you got it, right? How am I going to do that? Because right now, if I go in and start moving this object around, of course I can get, let's get in super close here. Go in. I'm going to run the free transform tool, which is this guy. I can rotate it like that. But where is it rotating around? Yeah, that middle. What's it look like? Yeah, right now it's rotating. Oops. It's rotating around that point. Okay? And I want it to rotate around maybe the top of the bounding box of my character. So way up here, right? Well, check it out. This is kind of neat. If you go over into your toolbar, we have a tool here called the Free Transform tool, which, as one might imagine, is going to allow us to transform, to move, scale, and rotate our object inside of a three-dimensional space, okay? Or two-dimensional space. This is the problem when I'm teaching 3D and 2D at the exact same time. Many apologies. One of the other cool things about working with the Free Transform tool is that it allows us to go in and edit the location of the pivot point. Now, please note that my cursor is right here on the center of the pivot point. You can see it goes to that circle. There we go. And now, check it out. I can left click and drag that anywhere I want. Okay? And I'm just going to put it way up here at the top. And now when I rotate it, it's going to rotate around that thing. Okay? So that's pretty neat. That's pretty neat. This is going to allow us to create the compelling result that we're after pretty quickly. Okay? Rock and roll. I like this very much. All right, let's start animating. And we're going to use our frame-by-frame method here to very quickly go in and start fleshing out what this thing is going to look like and how it's going to behave. I'm going to do the first couple here for you. And then, excuse me. Oh, one other thing. This is kind of a handy-dandy little keyboard or kind of option here. This first one's going to center your stage inside of your viewport. I'm in the upper right-hand corner of the viewport, by the way. So if you do this, okay, if you move your stage around, little crosshair will center it. The next one, excuse me, pull down menu, let's do fit in window, and then it'll maximize it. Okay? That's kind of handy. Okay, so let's jump in and start working with this thing. Now, let's follow our process here. Let's define pretty quickly how we want this thing to begin and end. Let's define the main storytelling frames, because we need to figure out the timing of all of this, right? We need to figure out what the keyframes are first and then go back in and draw the in-betweens, okay? Remember our process. We do keyframes first and then in-betweens, okay? Don't try to initially draw every single frame, okay? You guys don't have enough experience yet to do that straight-ahead style of animation. Let's zero in on the key poses, the key storytelling frames that's going to communicate the details of our animation, okay? So clearly this is going to be our first frame, all right? How do I add another keyframe of animation in here? Because what would be kind of a natural one? You got it, right? That's a good place to kind of zero in on. One right here in the center. Of course, naturally, there's going to be one over there as well. I'm going to do the first half of this little animation with you guys. Then we'll go from there. Okay, so walk me through the process. Every layer that we initially create is automatically going to get a keyframe. But how do I create another one? What's the process? So before we even hit the F6 button, and you're right, what do we got to do? Not necessarily, okay? Although you can do that. What's the next step? It's so easy, it's hard. We got to select the frame where we want to insert our keyframe or create our keyframe, okay? So I'm just going to arbitrarily put my next keyframe here on frame 2. Okay, and if you zoom in, take a look at it. Whoops. Okay, so there's frame 1. I'm going to select frame 2. And Rebecca, what's the keyboard shortcut? F6. You got it. So F6 on our keyboard. Oops, I didn't even hit the key. Is going to create another keyframe. Now, I want you to look very carefully at the icons and how these things are being drawn. Okay? Here, let me see. I can't get my playhead out of the way. But how are they the same? Those two little gray bars. They're both keyframes. Visually, how do we know that this is a keyframe and not an empty frame? The dot, that black dot. That black dot means keyframe, right? Because there's a couple things in here that we can create. We can create a keyframe. If we go to frame 3 and hit F7, what have we created on frame 3? So Tyler has just run into a problem. Before we resolve his problem, let's just answer the question real fast. What did we generate on frame 3 by hitting F7? An empty frame. Okay, notice that it's got a clear dot instead of the filled in dot. Now, if your F5, 6, and 7 are not doing what you want it to do, or they're not doing a single thing, there's a simple little change that we need to change here on the Mac. If you go into your global Apple system preferences, we need to restore the function of all of those F keys on the top of our keyboard. All right, and it's pretty easy. If you go into the keyboard section, what we're looking for here is this button right here. Use all F1, F2, etc. keys to their standard function keys. Okay, this is going to allow you to return that functionality back into that world. Okay. Yeah, there's a big divide within inside of our local campus community and professional communities as to the role of all of those function keys. And us old school animators are like, no, we got to have them, right? So this is something that you're probably going to have to change in a lot of different capacities. If you go over to the design lab, who knows what they're going to look like, okay? All right, so if we look down here at our timeline, we have 2 keyframes and an empty frame. Now, watch what happens to my artwork whoop, on that empty frame. Nada, nothing. Okay? And FYI, F5, F6, and F7. Okay? This is actually a blank keyframe over here. Okay? We could, if we wanted to, go in and add a frame. Let's do this. Let's move that frame. Yeah. Go back in time a step. There we go. Many apologies. Okay. All right. Let's go in and start animating. I'm going to get rid of some of these frames here. Or right-click on. I'm going to right-click on them. There we go. Let's cut those frames out of there. There we go. All right. Then we can start going in and animating this thing, right? So the first thing that we got to do is establish all of our keyframes. Now, I'm not thinking about their placement inside of our timeline yet, right? That's going to come next. I'm just trying to figure out the drawings first, okay? I need to block out the overall movement, much like we did with our bouncing ball. And then we can go back in and insert and add some additional in-betweens that will get us where we want to go, all right? All right, so here's our first keyframe. Here's our second keyframe on frame 2. Let's go ahead and begin to rotate this thing down a little bit to get what we're after. All right, and then naturally on frame 3, let's go ahead and I can't even see my function keys. There we go. I am so sorry. This cough is driving me crazy. All right. All right. So I have some empty keyframes here. How can I get the content from this keyframe over into that next one? You could, yeah, you could if you'd like, right? But really what we need here is just a frame, okay? A frame that contains that content, okay? So I just hit F5 there, and you see down there in my timeline, and I wish, maybe there's a way we can make it bigger. Let's do this. That's a little bit easier. That's fun too, but I think for the context of what we're doing here, let's do this. Let's just use the large. Is that at least a little bit easier to see? Okay. Keyframe, keyframe, frame, empty frame, right? So now we have a frame of animation, and we can create a keyframe on top of this, right? Insert, timeline, keyframe. Okay. Now it changes from an empty bar to a black dot, and we can continue posing this. Okay. Remember our grand workflow inside of Flash, or Animate now, excuse me, is that we have to create before we can move, okay? If you ever get stuck like this, okay, and this is something that a couple of you guys ran into over the course of the last week or so, you're like, okay, I know I need to add another keyframe in here. I want a keyframe right there, but there's no content right there. How do I create content right there? Because it's empty. My drawing goes away. It's there, then boop, it goes away. How do I get it back? Oops, excuse me, I hit the wrong one. So add a keyframe. Okay, oops. And I do this all the time. My brain is not working. We add a frame. So we go to the last frame that we have content for, which is on frame 3. Okay, because we're inserting something after. Okay, whenever you insert something, it's going to be created after the the location of our current time indicator, our playhead, right? So now we can insert in a frame or insert timeline frame, whoop, and now we have a frame of animation. Okay, and we can convert that into a new keyframe if we like. So that goes there, and it goes down. I missed it. Now it's going back down the other way. Boom. Boom. Okay. So now I can insert timeline, keyframe, or frame. I'm sorry. Frame copies the content from the previous frame, and now we can convert it if we'd like into a keyframe. Okay, and make a change. There we go. So there's basically my animation, right? Bloop. A little too fast. A little too fast. And I forgot to change my frame rate before we get started in this. Let's just change this to 24. That way we're actually timing it out correctly. So now that we have the general motion of our animation established, we can go in and we can start figuring out the timing of all this. How long is it going to take for our animation for our ball to go one swing? How long is that? Let's figure it out, right? That's kind of our job now. We've established what the drawings are. Now we have to go in and do the timing of it, okay? The timing of it's going to help us figure out the global spacing of our in-betweens. But how long is it going to take to transition between that drawing and that drawing? That's one swing. Those are the keyframes for one swing. How long is that? It's a good question. Let's see. Let's figure it out. You can even kind of, I do it internally, but you can tap your feet. So 2 beats, maybe less than 2 beats. So 1 beat would be like 1 second in my mind, okay? So if it's that's 24 frames to do what's 1 beat. Maybe it's like a beat and a half. So what are we looking at here? 36 frames for 1 swing, right? Yeah. Sure. Okay. Mm-hmm. That looks right to me. Yeah, you're good. You're doing good. Just on that second keyframe, just make sure you change the pose pretty dramatically, right? We're not trying to do every single frame in sequence. That's a waste of our time, okay? Because we can't reasonably do all the in-betweens without globally understanding how long the total swing animation is going to require, right? How long of a range of frames. Excuse me. So now we have the pleasure of going in and changing the timing of all this, okay? How can we do that? We've established the location of all these keyframes. What's next? Kinda. We have to establish the correct placement of all of these keyframes in time. Like I need to have that keyframe way over here at frame 36. Okay? How am I going to do that? So here's what folks try to do. Okay? They grab these in here, and they move them down. And that kind of works, okay? You got to be careful with this because you can move them to the left pretty easily and see how it extends the length of that first keyframe. Going back this way can be dangerous at times because you can erase some of your work pretty quickly. let's do it. Let's see if we can get this down over here to 36. There we go. So now we've got a whole bunch of empty frames in there. Over this one. So this one, we're not really getting in there to move that last frame of this. It's only going there. So how do I do it? We can copy some frames too. Let's try this. We can copy those frames. Go here. Paste and overwrite frames. There we go. So now we're holding that first keyframe for a long period of time. Paste and overwrite. Paste and overwrite. So now we're holding that. Okay. Let's do it one more time. Oops. There we go. All right. It's over here. And I missed, excuse me. See, that one needs to be on frame 36. Okay. That one's now on frame 36. We need some content in here. Where do we want that down frame? Would make sense. Kind of in the middle, right? So that should go to frame 18, which is right there's 20, 19, 18. Okay. However, we have all these in here that we need to get rid of. Okay, so let's cut those off. Now they're empty frames. That one, let's copy it. Select a range of frames. Let's do paste. Oops, it didn't copy the one that I want. Let's try it again. Copy frames. Let's do it in a short period of paste and overwrite. Yeah, now it should be, yep. Now it's holding that frame until it hits the next one. So there it transitions down, and then it goes back up. So that one's actually the wrong. Let's do this. Oops, I cleared the wrong one. I wanted to clear all these guys. Let's clear those, because those are getting in the way. There we go. Okay, and then 36. So let's clear these, because those are getting confusing, right? So let's try this. Let's try grabbing that keyframe one more time. And let's insert. Oop, we don't want to insert, excuse me, because that's going to bump everything down. Let's copy it. And let's paste it. Now, it moved everything down, because it just wants to be a punk with me today. Let's see. It's not going to allow me to. Why am I unsuccessful in this endeavor today? Ugh. Oop. Okay. Let's try this since this is not working. Let's add in a new insert. Let's add a new keyframe. Okay. Oops. Here. These are just getting out of the way. Now, why am I not? Let's do convert. Clear keyframe. There it is. That's what I'm after. That's what I was missing. Excuse me. Let me go back in time and get you guys up and running with what I just did, because it was not working and I refused to lose. If you double click on a bar, see how it selects the entirety of that bar. And what I did was I did clear keyframe, okay? And that's going to get rid of the selected stuff, and it's automatically going to adopt whatever the last keyframe was. So let's, on that note, let's see if we can do that exact same thing on these in here. So if we clear them, yeah, it's going to flood that area with whatever keyframe information was before it, which is what we had on that first one. There we go. And then it goes there. And then on frame, these got bumped down. So let's move them back to 36. There it is. Okay. Now, if we play our animation, yeah, it works, kind of. Of course, this downward one, I'm going to get rid of all these jazz, all this stuff in here. Yeah, from that to 40, let's just get rid of them. Okay, that way it just ends there. Cool. Clear it out, clear that range so it adopts the previous keyframe. There we go. There's my animation, or the major structural pieces of my animation. Let's loop it and start looking at what we need to do here to get a compelling result. Here it goes. All right, so there's the general movement. General movement. Maybe we even hold that last keyframe for a second. There we go. Let's see how long that feels. How long should it stay up there? Yeah, that's not bad. Let's roll with that, okay? So now that we've drawn all the major keyframes, our task is this. We have to go in and start drawing all the in-betweens. But where do we draw all these in-betweens, and how do we do them? Well, we need to start considering this idea of spacing, because we've worked on the timing. Timing is really kind of an understanding of how long the general movement's going to take. But the spacing of all of our keyframes really is the one thing that establishes the sense of speed, okay? And I want my arc here, or my pendulum, to travel along its movement arc, okay? And be very slow at the top, fast in the middle, and then slow at the end, okay? Excuse me. Inside the world of animation, you're going to find that there's some great tricks that help us do this. Let me show you one real fast, because I know we're running out of time. And it's these really cool little ruler marks, or rulers, okay? And I'm going to do this just on frame 1 here. And I'm going to grab, let's just say a rectangle, make its color not blue, okay? I'm just going to draw out a simple rectangle here. There we go. And inside of that rectangle, I want to go in and maybe just with the width stroke that's just a little bit bigger. That's still pretty tiny. There we go. Okay. And now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go in and just create some little tick marks inside of this ruler. Each of the red tick marks are going to represent a keyframe. Okay. Now what we're trying to do is visualize how many drawings that we're going to need to create and their relative spacing to each other. It's an old school trick. Okay. So the red ones are going to be the keyframes. So this is the first frame of animation, and then along its life cycle, this is going to be, let's just pretend this is our last one, okay? And of course, we're going to have a keyframe here in the middle of our animation that defines the midpoint of its arc, right? Let's change the color to a lovely shade of green. And now all the green ones are going to represent the in-betweens. Now, the way we visualize the slowing of movement is by compressing the keyframes, okay? So if we want to have something that moves very slowly, check it out. We'll have a lot of keyframes that are relatively close and packed into each other. Then, as it begins to get faster, the relative position of my pendulum is going to change, okay? There we go. You can almost start to see the gradation of speed kind of appear in front of us in our little ruler markers, right? When all these little tick marks are close together, we're visualizing that it's slow here and then fast in here, okay? The distance the pendulum travels in between these ruler markers is very small. That's why we've put them close together. So think of it like that. It's kind of a visualization of how far that object is moving in between frames, okay? Does that make sense? Yeah? It's a great way for us to conceptualize pretty quickly how many in-betweens we're going to need and their relative role to one another, okay? Now, I have, what 43 frames to play with here. So I would need to go in and figure out how to divide up all these ruler markers over the course of 43 frames, okay? I'm not going to do 43 because it'd be like watching paint dry as I try to visualize this stuff out. But I think you can probably continue to use this idea to help you plot out and plan the spacing of all of your in-betweens. If you do this on a different layer, then you can hide it after the fact and not have to worry about it. Excuse me. Okay, so I know that I'm going to need to have a couple keyframes here. So I've just advanced my playhead one, okay? And let's do this, okay? So naturally we can go in, we can start rotating our object around, okay? If we use our free transform tool, we can rotate it around that central pivot point, which is kind of nice. But what did we just do here? We just can't move our playhead forward and move our artwork, right? Because what happens? It changes the content of that keyframe. What do we need to do? Oops, hit the wrong button. What do we need to do on frame 2? Yeah. Okay. So we need to convert that frame into a keyframe. Okay. And now, oops, I was on the wrong layer. There we go. So insert, timeline, keyframe. Now that we got a black dot, I can make a change here, and that will be preserved. Okay? Let's go to the next one. Insert, timeline, keyframe. I got a black dot, and I can make a change. Okay? There we go. All right. And now we're starting to get some movement in here. One of the really cool things about working inside of Animate is that they've given us this function to enable that allows us to see what's coming after and before the frame that we're currently sitting on. This is called onion skinning, and it's incredibly useful in helping us plan out and plot where we want all our keyframes to go. Because often we want to be able to, this is in every sense kind of simulating that flip that we see classic animators doing, right? They flip so they can see what's happening before and after very quickly. For us, it's really cool. It's this button right here inside of our interface that toggles the onion skinning on, and it's a very, very useful tool. Okay? Onion skin. Bloop. And now, check it out. We can see what's coming before and after. My playhead's sitting here on frame 1, so we're seeing the content of frame 1. But the ghosted green are frames 2 and 3. This very quickly allows us to plot out and plan out how we want the spacing of all of our keyframes to be. There we go. Let's go to frame 4. Hit F6. There we go. Let's make a change. Maybe on this one I start to space it out a little bit more because it's starting to go a little bit faster. Maybe a little too much. Let's go back a little bit here. There we go. Go to frame 5. Add a new keyframe. Start maybe perhaps spacing it out. Yeah. Now I think I have my spacing in here is a little too loosey-goosey. So I think what I'm going to do is really pack it in so there's very little movement. And this is really kind of the big benefit of working with onion skinning, is that we can make an animation, go back in and change it, and understand the impact of that change in the context of what we're doing. Because perhaps I think my animation is just generally too fast. There we go. Then on this frame, bring it down a little bit further. I'm hitting F6 here. Oops, I missed. And I'm looking at the distance the ball is traveling between all these frames. And I'm trying to craft something. Yeah. So it's going to slowly start and then go. Okay? And we're going to continue this process throughout the entirety of our animation. Okay? By going in and really fine-tuning and hand-tuning all of your easing and these spacings, it's really going to help you understand the role of each one of these keyframes in the larger context of your animation and help you establish the correct illusion of speed. Yeah, it does take a little bit of energy, but it's not too bad. Okay? That's how the old school animators did it. Okay? Sound good? So that's what we're doing for our homework assignment this week. Okay? Block out your keyframes first, like I did. Okay? Don't start doing this jazz until you figured out the total duration of your swing, right? Because if you didn't know that your entire swing is going to be 43 frames, your sense of timing is going to be completely off, and you're going to have to double up your work, basically. There's going to be more editing in that process, okay? By blocking out the keyframes, it gives us an opportunity to establish the overall timing, and then we go back in the next pass and do all the in-betweens, okay? As you're blocking out the keyframes, don't forget that little trick of clearing keyframes or clearing frames, which then adopts, remember we were right-clicking on. There we go. Clearing keyframes is going to delete what's there in that range of frames and then adopt the frame that's above it or before it in time. Now, I saw a hand. I want to make sure all the questions get answered. Yes, sir. Sure. How about we do this one better, because it's 12:15. It's time to get out of here. One thing to note, okay? 3 complete swings, okay? 3 swings, at least 27 frames of animation. I'm going to leave it up to you and your sense of timing to figure out what that looks like. Try real hard to not use the motion tweenings. I want you guys to get it to get used to going in and adjusting all of these keyframes by hand, okay? Because motion tweening is only going to be something that's going to work on very few movements inside the world of animation, okay? Everything else is going to be custom, so it's important that we lay this foundation pretty early. Questions, comments? All right, good luck. I'll see you guys next week.